We are in the third week of Lent, and during the Lenten season, we generally hear many things connected to Lent. But when the season is about to begin, when Lent is round the corner, the talk among many of the circles is, what are we going to do during the Lenten season? Some people we see come with a list of activities and they plan what they will do for Lent. Some of them are also very systematic and they exactly know that in the first week we will do this, second week this, etc. Among these would be also avoiding non-veg dishes, giving up some habits and participating in prayers and pilgrimages in churches and at home. Now, have you ever wondered why people do this? Or does Lent really signify doing all these things? Well, let's take a look at this and try to understand what Lent really means and what are the normal practices that are generally associated with Lent. Now we see that churches, on the other hand, also tend to conduct a number of spiritual renewal programs for the faithful. We see that retreats during the Lenten season are a very common theme. We also have recollections being conducted. We also have confession sessions. And we see that during the whole Lenten season, the theme in many of the churches is to stop, reflect and move on in the love of God. And therefore we also see that pilgrimages to various churches also becomes another feature of the Lenten season. But for a common man, for me and for you, what does Lent really mean? And what are the things that we need to keep in mind during the Lenten season? Well, let's take a look first and foremost at why so much importance is given to Lent and what are the different interpretations that people have regarding Lent. Now, to put it in very simple words, if Advent is the time of waiting for the Lord, then we see that Lent is a time for preparation. It is a time for introspection, a time to renew ourselves, to put aside all those bad things that we have been doing and to start afresh. And we do all this with the hope that we will be able to rejoice with the risen Lord. And therefore the whole emphasis during the Lenten season is to purify oneself, to make oneself clean of all that which takes us away from God. So let us take a look at some of the key features of the Lenten season. First and foremost, we see that Lent is the period of 40 days which comes before Easter. And probably some of you all may have taken the trouble of going to the calendar and counting. And you all will realize that, well, from Ash Wednesday till Holy Saturday is more than 40 days. How come we still say 40 days? Well, here's the catch. We see that during the Lenten season, we do not include Sundays. So it's basically 40 days from Ash Wednesday to Holy Saturday, but excluding the Sundays that come in between. And therefore, beginning on Ash Wednesday, we see that we begin a season whose main emphasis is reflection and preparation for receiving the risen Lord. Now, by observing the 40 days of Lent, we see that Christians replicate the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And most importantly, it is also a reminder of the preparation that Jesus had before he went for his ministry. We all know that before Jesus could begin his public ministry, he went to the desert And for 40 days and 40 nights, he spent time in prayer and abstinence. And therefore we see whatever he was able to do in his mission was mainly because he had developed a good connection with the Lord, because he had prepared himself in order to face the challenges that the world would offer him. A simple analogy of this would be when we prepare for our exams. If we are prepared well, we are able to answer any questions that the examiner puts before us. And once we answer the exam, we are filled with that sense of satisfaction. On the other hand, if we do not prepare well, what happens is we are disillusioned and we feel sad and somehow dry and not satisfied. And therefore, a lot of emphasis is given on preparation, preparing well so that you could be happy and satisfied with the end result. We see that Lent is marked by both fasting, both from food as well as festivities. And it is also described as a time to get into a deeper relationship with God, which means a time for personal reflection that prepares our hearts and our minds for Good Friday and especially for Easter. We see that if Easter celebrates the resurrection of Jesus, Lent recalls all the events leading up to that event, including the washing of the feet, including the institution of the Eucharist and the death on the cross. Now, the Christian churches that observe Lent in the 21st century use it as a time of prayer and penance. Now, we see that different people have different ways of going about the whole Lenten season. We see that some of them fast for the entire 40 days. That means they are content with only one meal a day. There are others who would fast on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. And then there are others who would fast on all Fridays and Ash Wednesday. And so we see that people have different ways how they would go about with fasting in the Lenten season. And it is more common these days for us to surrender some of our favorite food items and also to give up on certain habits which we cannot live without. But we see that whatever sacrifice we do, it is nothing compared to what Jesus has done for us. We have been saved from eternal damnation because of the sacrifice that was done by Jesus. And therefore, whatever sacrifice we may do during the Lenten season, our fasting, abstaining from non-veg dishes, or giving aside certain bad habits that we have, is only an external reflection of what we are preparing for. It is only an external act. It is not something that because of which we are rewarded. Let's see this with an example. Now, when we look at the scribes and the Pharisees, we see that one of the most contrasting features that they had to Jesus was that they thought because they followed the law, because they did everything that was prescribed, that their salvation was earned by them. And therefore they felt that they deserved to be saved just because they followed that rule. But Jesus says that it is God who saves us. And what the Pharisees do by relying on the law, they rely on themselves. The whole aspect of trust and dependence on the Lord is lost. And that is what Jesus warns us today. He tells us that if we let our practices of Lent, such as fasting and abstaining, make us think, if these practices make us think that because we have done this, we have done something great, well, we are mistaken. We will be just like the scribes and the Pharisees. placing importance on ourselves and our activities, but we really need to place importance on the salvation that the Lord gives us. Another thing also is that if our hearts are not clean, if our intentions are not good, however much fasting or abstaining we may do will have no meaning if our inside is not purified and cleansed. And therefore, we need to give emphasis on this inner cleansing. Of course, the external practices such as fasting and abstaining are important. In a way, they help us to mortify ourselves and prepare ourselves better. But it should not be given all the importance. The importance should be on the whole process of preparing ourselves, of purifying our hearts in order to meet the risen Lord. Just as Jesus prepared for his ministry, we too are called to prepare for the resurrection of Jesus by purifying our lives.